So I've watched enough videos on YouTube and have done enough to realize that most people, we just skim through this stuff. We need to figure out the information that we are looking for to get this stuff. So this is a coolant leak. Coolant in my oil. Where the coolant was coming from on a big cam 4 with a single filter housing, and this is the different style. This is with the canister style on top of the filter housing that has the 2 band clamps that come off. What the problem was is if you don't want to watch the full video, what the problem was is that the seal from the housing to the block, there was a crack in it or an imperfection. Something happened to where coolant would seep into the oil. You would think it'd be vice versa. It wasn't. Coolant would seep into the oil through the gasket that sealed from the coolant cavity to the oil cavity. If you know anything on these Cummins, you would understand how that housing installs on the side. That's where my coolant was coming from. Only saw it in the oil filter, didn't see it anywhere else. Only reason I knew I was getting coolant somewhere is because I was smoking. Somehow that oil was getting in the combustion chamber. Somebody clarify how that is, because it wasn't in the oil pan. It was only in my filter and sludge coming out of my breather. And that's the only place that this was coming from. I pressure tested it. Don't make any comments if you don't watch the whole video about it might be a liner cylinder issue. It wasn't. It fixed it. Truck's running now. So I went ahead and did an oil cooler. I pressure tested it. I found a little bit more coolant in the catch basin that I had the next day with it pressurized through the night. And it could have been residual. I'm just not. At $193 for a new cooler, I'm going to throw it on there. So watch the video if you want, or this is it. Put it at the front so you don't have to waste your time. Hope you're having a good day. Okay, so big cam 4, put a cam in it, rods, mains, did a whole bunch of stuff to it. And still getting sludge out of the, I put injectors in it, a ton of stuff. And I was getting sludge out of my breather. I put an air-to-air. I don't know why I call them an air-to-air. It's an aftercooler, but I always call it an air-to-air. And an air-to-air obviously is a different setup than that. It's in front of the radiator. It's ram air. It's not cooled the same. So I don't know why I keep doing this, but I keep calling this thing. So it's an aftercooler on the intake. Because the aftercooler, the element in it was leaking. Bought a used one. The used one lasted 2 weeks. So here's the second one. And it was just puking, cooling out, cracked something in there on this side. It was going into number 6, so yeah. And then started puking out as well. So this is the third one from the original motor when I bought the truck. It sealed up. Pressure tested it, it sealed up. But after all this work, all having this complete thing torn apart, still getting coolant, sludge out of the breather. No coolant in the oil. Okay, no coolant in the oil. When I drained, this is the second time I've drained the oil. And it's sat overnight. It's done, it has sat. Enough time to separate, nothing. Not a drop. I don't know if anybody else has seen this. Finally figured out. We pressure tested it when we did the work. When I did the work, I always say we, I don't know why I say that. When I did the work, left the pan off, pressure tested. Well, it was we, my friend was here. He helped me, it was his pressure tester. Pressure tested it for an hour, rotated the motor over, 90 degrees every 15 minutes. I think it was more like an hour and a half. Nothing out of the block. Nada. People were saying, well, the block's not warmed up, has a crack liner, probably from ingesting the coolant from the air to air. It's a little confusing on this video. Is I had done a major amount of work, and I did have some help on it. At the very end, one of my friends came over and helped me with this pressure tester, but I had this motor completely torn down besides the heads. I did a cam in it, rods and mains, injectors, a lot of other stuff in it, accessory drive stuff, pump work, and could not find where this coolant was getting ingested into the motor, because I had ran this motor after everything had been put together after the cam job and thought it had been fixed because it had a massive leak in the used aftercooler I had put on. But after all that had been done, I was still getting something out of the breather. When I talk about people saying certain things, it sounded like I was talking down on them. I wasn't. I actually I joined a forum off of Facebook, the 55 Cummins forum, and those guys helped me through this thing. And some of them were talking about maybe it had a crack liner, and I'm not talking down on those guys. I wasn't trying to belittle anyone. I was just very excited because it wasn't that problem. I wasn't going to have to start pulling heads, liners, and pistons, because now instead of spending $4,000 on the cam job that I did, I'd have to sink another $8,000 into this thing. So I was just more excited about that. I just wanted to clarify that. I wasn't trying to talk anything down on any advice I was given, because I was trying to soak up anything I could get on that. Anyways, hopefully somebody finds this interesting, because this was a really weird thing on this big cam 4. Maybe somebody has had one of these problems before on a 4 with this oil cooler setup. Not something you see every day, at least for me. Dumped the oil in it when it was hot, took the filter off, a cup of coolant in the filter. There's nowhere else that it was in the coolant system. I pressure tested the cooler at shop air and put it underneath. I put it in I put it in a pan of water. No bubbles that I could see. This is the weird part. It's been on here for probably a good hour. Truck's warm now. The truck is warm. The cooler was cold when I did it. But the cooler should be pressurizing oil into the coolant system. Right now, I have coolant coming out of my oil filter housing. I have coolant going into my oil, not oil going into my coolant. How in the world? I mean, it's obviously something's wrong in there. It's a good test. What in the Sam Hill? You would think I'd be getting cross-contamination. I have no oil whatsoever. I've drained this coolant twice, just did it yesterday, did it when we did all the work to the truck. No oil traces whatsoever in the cooling system, whatsoever. But I have coolant in my oil and only in my filter. Yet I'm getting sludge. Compression gas is coming out. It's all cleaned up. Gonna take this thing off, the oil filter housing and the cooler. Definitely just gonna get a new cooler. Probably gonna get a new housing. I hate to go used because you don't know what you're getting. Do something. This is crazy. Crazy. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this before. I would love to know if anybody's seen this before. Okay. I feel like I always get the weird shit. Don't know why, but I do. Getting oil in the filter. Nowhere else. Sludge coming out. Well, there's a gasket here. And there's another port back behind here that's coolant. This is oil. this gasket was bleeding off into my flippin' oil port, going back where my cooler was at, where the cooler was at. That's ridiculous. Come shame on you. Shame on you for such a design. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but that is so sad. I need to make sure I don't keep these ports super clean, because that is a good way to kill it. See that? See where it was going down? So, where you can't see it, obviously. It was puking out behind the seal, and it was shooting down in there, which was great because I was draining oil, and I was just seeing if there was going to be any coolant coming out when I was pressure testing it, and I forgot. I forgot to put another big pan. I didn't think water coolant's going to be coming out of there. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So now I got coolant coming out of my pan because it went down that port. Now that, oh, it just pisses me off so much. Criminally. If you have, it wasn't even the oil cooler. It was a stupid gasket. Oh my gosh. That's insane. So we're pressurized. Needle still hasn't moved. Put the filter housing back on because I just want to verify if the cooler's bad. And I think it is, because I am still getting a drippy because I cleaned this out really good. So it's just surprising because I pressurized this thing. I got the block heater in, so to keep this thing warm through the night, keep it expanded, and we will see how much coolant we have in there, because I'm gonna give it the benefit of doubt of having a little bit of residual in there. So if it's leaking, it's gonna have a bunch in there tomorrow morning. We'll check on it tomorrow morning. So it was all cleaned out last evening, and now it's got quite a bit in it. So I'm going to I'm buying one. I'm not gonna guess if there's residual amount of coolant in there, because I cleaned it out pretty good before I put it back on there. It's nice and warm, nice and hot from the block heater that's been going on. So I'm not guessing anymore, which is kind of nice putting all these things on, because I got to see where all the coolant leaks were too. I got some coolant leaks still. You think?